Welcome, ladies and gents, to the final driver ratings of the season. Abu Dhabi, round 24. It's been a long, fantastic season, going all the way back to Bahrain. It just seems absolute age ago, doesn't it? It's been a long season. Thankfully, it's a short pre-season. Starts again early or mid-March. 25 for the Oz GP. We've got lots of exciting things to look forward to in between, I'm sure. There's a lot of news, I'm sure, that will be going on. We've got the Perez scenario to resolve. We've got the GM Cadillac updates that will be coming as well. But yeah, lots of news. Let's jump straight to it though. Number one, Lando Norris. And was this his best drive of the season? In my books, it definitely was. It was flawless. After watching his teammate and his rear gunner go off and spin round and last on the first corner, he just knew it was all down to him on his shoulders. And we've seen him had good drives before, and Singapore springs back to mind, but he made a few big errors in that race, which could have really cost him, and he couldn't afford any of them. The whole season, the championship rested on his shoulders, and to do it under the pressure, he had never really escaped from the Ferraris. One slip up and they would have been right back in it and passed, and the championship could have been Ferrari's. But Lando Norris, he drove absolutely fantastic. He was flawless. A lights to flag finish, which was absolutely spot on every single point. Even with the team in the pit stops, they just didn't put a foot wrong. A 2-second stop, it was everything just was absolutely perfect from them. And it finally came at the end of the season where we've seen this team. Maybe if, you know, earlier in the season, if they were that kind of scenario, we could have easily have seen these guys slip up, but they were picture perfect, weren't they? Every single one of them. Lando Norris, I think he drove impeccably. Like I say, for me, it was just the perfect race from him. Managed the gap to Carlos pretty comfortably, was 3-4 seconds ahead, give himself that little bit of a buffer for that one lap where Ferrari did try the undercut, and that the pace was just enough, as in he came about a second and a half and then controlled it again from the front from there. Absolutely flawless, a brilliant drive. At the end he was shouting that next year's my year, and well, we just don't know, do you? Because there's 4 teams gunning for it, a lot to be playing for, and who knows is going to come on top. Is this a missed opportunity a year for Lando Norris and McLaren? Personally, I think so. If you've got the car that's Constructors' Championship and the guy that's won the drivers, their car ends up in third in the Constructors' Championship, I think that's, is definitely a missed opportunity from his side. I'm sure they'll look back at a lot of things. It's their poor early season start that really cost him. But Lando Norris, let's talk, this race was absolutely bob on. I'm giving him a 10 out of 10 because there's nothing less you can give him. Fantastic. Go in with a big spring in their step, don't they, next year? Target on their back. They're number one. They won't have the development time that they've enjoyed throughout this season and last season, where they finished 4th and jumped to 1st, which is absolutely brilliant from them. Could that cost them? Because we've seen their upgrades have been absolutely spot on, and we've seen it with Red Bull, who had reduced time, one because of the one they were champions, and then obviously they carried over that fine and penalty as well, which has hampered their upgrades. So in season now is going to be a bigger challenge for them going into next season, but it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. And yeah, 10 out of 10, brilliant from Lando Norris. Hope they enjoy this one. They're well-deserved champions. Next up, Carlos Sainz for Ferrari, his last race for Ferrari, and this guy has drove absolutely brilliantly this year. We've seen other guys who's moving teams, and that's been announced sort of mid-season or a lot later than his. He's dealt with this demon from race 1, and that's never easy. He came back, and the Australian win was absolutely phenomenal from him, and showed just what a true class act he is, and he has been throughout this whole season, whole campaign, with this shadow hanging over his head. We see how disappointed he was at the end. I know it was all this talk about Lewis Hamilton, but this guy is taking his seat, so it must feel absolutely horrible for him to be in that position, and he's just drove absolutely phenomenally. There's been a few mistakes, but very few and far between. Does he really deserve to be leaving Ferrari? Absolutely not. His performances have been absolutely outstanding. It's not a Sergio Perez scenario here where we think, they've made the right choice. It's just a tough one when you've got a 7 world champion coming potentially. I can understand why Ferrari snapped him up. It works perfectly in all angles, but for Carlos Sainz, you do feel sorry for this guy, but he drove brilliantly well. Got from P4, he got a bad start. The sea parted when Verstappen and Piastri hit each other. It couldn't have worked. The first lap was absolutely perfect for Ferrari. You would have thought the dream was on. Carlos Sainz makes his way up into second place. He's got the chance to hunt down Lando, Norris, and we've seen Charles Leclerc up to P8, and you thought, for all the world, could the miracle happen? Carlos Sainz the car just wasn't as quick as the McLaren's, was it? And that was a surprise, because for me, going into this weekend, all talk was this is a Ferrari track, and actually McLaren's came strong. They did a brilliant job. Dropped back from Norris, but it was a solid race, a really good end to his Ferrari career. Will he make his way back into that seat at some point? Who knows? He's going to Williams next year. It'll be a tough season, I think, for him. A lot of changes, but like he said pre-race, he was already thinking about, what does this car do? How does this work? Going through all the dials, shifts, trying to remember everything he can so he can take that over to the Williams team and develop that car. And it just shows how brilliantly his race thinking through mid-race and all that has been absolutely phenomenal. It's probably not got the raw one lap pace of Charles Leclerc, but everything else he pulls out in the race is so decisive. He's such a does brilliantly well at just managing a race, and he did that well here today. Disappointing he just couldn't pass Lando Norris in the end, but I think he drove a real solid race for Ferrari, a 9 out of 10 for him. Third place, Charles Leclerc, and wow, what a turn of events from him. Such a shame that he had that 10-second penalty on FP1, really put a bit of a dent, and then it just got worse with the exit in Q2, meant he was 11th, started 19th in the end because of the penalty behind him, but effectively last, and he couldn't have hoped for a better lap one. He was aggressive, had to be, was daring. His move around the 3 or 4 cars, helped obviously by Verstappen, Piastri, helped by Bottas and Perez, but all that, he just put himself in the right places. He was like a knife through butter. He was absolutely a hot knife through butter, should I say. Absolutely brilliant start from him, and then got himself right up into P8. And then when he got up to behind people like Gasly, we've seen George Russell struggle behind him, but he was so decisive in his moves, and then managed to undercut George Russell in the pits. I think he probably wished afterwards that he'd probably gone a little bit longer. There was no safety car or a safety car really that would have really helped him out and bunched that gap up between him and the top 3. It never really came to give him a chance or a fight for anything more than P3, because by the time he got there, he had a 9-10 second gap to Carlos Sainz, which is difficult to cover at the best of times, and he was in similar machinery to Sainz, and the McLaren was fast, but he drove absolutely brilliantly. He was gutted at the end that the championship wasn't on, but he did absolutely everything he could to try and do what he can, and a brilliant recovery from P19 to P3. Driver of the day, well deserved. I'm giving him a 10 out of 10. Fourth place man, Lewis Hamilton, and much like Charles Leclerc, a horrible qualifying session for him, going out P18, made up a couple of places because of penalties of the Williams ahead of him, and you'd thought, oh, it's going to end badly for him and Mercedes. It's not been the best campaign. He sort of came out and said, look, probably have not handled my emotions well. It's been a difficult season. His one lap pace has seemed to have lost him a little bit. We remember Kimi Räikkönen sort of saying that was the first thing that went for him. Although listening to Nico Rosberg recently, he said Kimi's was strange. He won a world championship and then lost his one lap speed straight after. So at the peak, Lewis has had a difficult couple of seasons. And will it be just take that new car, something to work on over the winter? And I'm sure he will, going into a new team, just that little extra boost. He was massively emotional all weekend this weekend, and it came out at the end, to hear that one last time of Strat 5 hammer time from Bono and him was just classic. It was the perfect strategy for him. He was the only one to do the hard medium strategy early on, and it worked fantastically well. Got himself up into P5, and then charging down George Russell, and that pass around the outside was absolutely phenomenal. And don't make two bones about it, George Russell is not the guy of sentiment and say, yep, have this 4th place. You know, he caught up George 14 seconds ahead of him he was at the time, and just to catch that up and make that pass crucial around the outside. It was a brilliant move on older tyres. Now the mediums would have been worn out. Yes, George Russell had slower hards, but it was still an absolutely brilliant move from him. I'm giving him a 10 out of 10 for his last race at Mercedes. He's had a phenomenal career there, hasn't he? And how will it go for Ferrari is the big question. Will Mercedes miss him? And that's the big one, and I think they definitely will early doors. It depends on the speed of Kimi Antonelli. A lot of pressure on his shoulders. This young man, he's come with a lot of hype and not really proven anything just yet. So there is a lot of pressure on this young kid to come in and perform, as it is with all these young lads, isn't it? They come in, and especially if you've taken a seat at the top team, there's a lot to prove. So he's got a lot to go for him. I wish him well. But for Lewis and Mercedes, his career has been absolutely phenomenal from all the doubts. And I was probably one to say going from McLaren to Mercedes. Mercedes were nowhere, but Mercedes had all the right personnel. Ross Brawn was there. They had such a big technical team. They suffered the pain of the aerodynamics shuffling. I remember that when they had a wind tunnel with what was it, a 50% model, and they moved it up to a 60% model to make it more relevant, and suffered that pain with Schumacher was there, and that sort of really, they had this setting up stage was done for him. And when he came into Mercedes, yes, it was a struggle, and as soon as that came out, it was just to be consistently 6 world titles on the bounce, which is absolutely phenomenal. To have that hunger and drive to do that for as long as he has at Mercedes was absolutely brilliant, to raise his game and to come back. You know, he's beaten by Rosberg, who, you know, really took it out of Rosberg to beat Lewis Hamilton, and just shows what a incredible competitor Lewis is, that Rosberg managed that and then didn't like what he'd become to be that world champion and pushed to that level and retired after it. And said it really took an awful lot to, you know, build up and do that to Lewis. And so Lewis going to Ferrari will be brilliant for Charles Leclerc to sort of really test his gauge and see where he's at against a multiple world champion, and he's had a phenomenal career. And that's what I'm going to say on that. A 10 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. 5th place man George Russell, and he had a so-so race. The team went on 2 different car setups, didn't they? And that's why Toto was very angry. He sort of blamed that side of things for Lewis's bad qualifying. They went for 2 setups that didn't work in qualifying for Lewis, but had a really good race car, and it was kind of the opposite for George. He really struggled in the race. He was actually in a little bit of no man's land. He was stuck behind Pierre Gasly for an awfully long time, couldn't make his way past him, and then just wasn't fast enough to catch the Ferraris, closed them down. It was kind of in a bit of a no man's land. His strategy was, well, decent enough. He went for as long as he probably could on their mediums, and then switched to the hards, but it wasn't fast on either of the tyres at any point, and then passed by Lewis Hamilton at the end, who was on obviously the better tyre strategy overall. Difficult final weekend for George Russell, but he's proven what a brilliant guy and competitor he is, and leads that Mercedes team into next season, and it'll be interesting to see how he handles that next time. A 6 out of 10 for me for this weekend though. 6th place man Max Verstappen, and well, he caused all the drama. Juan Pablo Montoya was the one that was actually saying to the McLarens, actually, you've got to watch out for the Verstappen dive bomb, and it came. He had an absolutely phenomenal start. He was past Carlos Sainz, probably even before the start-finish line, wasn't he? It was such a great start, which gave him the opportunity to have a sniff on Oscar Piastri. He apologised for that, but it was a classic Verstappen dive bomb. The door was always going to close on him. Piastri actually gave him enough room, and it's surprising because Verstappen does these dive bomb, but it's always manages to just somehow keep in control and out of danger and damage. He wasn't this time. He was given a 10-second penalty. From there onwards, though, his pace was poor at best of times, wasn't he? Down to P11, made himself up a decent couple of places, got himself back up into P6 in the end, and then just a little bit disappointed with his comments, like I said, in the race preview of the stupid idiot's comments on giving him 20 seconds. I mean, he was the stupid idiot with that move on Oscar Piastri. There's no doubts about that. It was a clear. He was not even halfway alongside Oscar when he made that move. So as brilliant as Verstappen is, this was probably one of his poor races, but he went in with absolutely nothing to lose and all to gain, and you can see that on the first corner. He probably knew that he didn't have the car in race conditions to make it past people, but kind of just he's brilliant at getting ahead and just managing tyres better like that, isn't he? And it cost them both in the end. But yeah, not a great race or final end to the season for him. He was pretty inconspicuous throughout the race, wasn't he? And just in a little bit of no man's land. The car hasn't been good in parts, but he's been phenomenal in a large part of the season, and a big reason why him personally, his driving style, his skills, of why they've won the Drivers' Championship. He's done an absolute phenomenal job to maximise everything. Not here this weekend though, and I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. A 7th place finish for Pierre Gasly, and he managed to give Alpine that 6th place in the Constructors' title, which for all the world they didn't really deserve. A brilliant race in Brazil has really set them up for that, but their car performance and the upgrades that they've bought and moving them from where they are to later on in the season has been absolutely phenomenal. They've gone from way down at the back, absolutely in no man's land, to be fighting in the top 10 comfortably, 6th, 7th, some real brilliant performances. He had a brilliant qualifying session, and from there on his race was so-and-so. He just had to stay out of trouble, beat the Haas of Hulkenberg, who didn't really let him off the hook. Again, another one, he had pressure on his shoulders. Hulkenberg was just 2.5, 3 seconds behind him for much of that race. And then he I think he did a pretty solid job bringing home some good points and sealing that 6th place in the Constructors, because it was all down to him in the end. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. 8th place finish for Nico Hulkenberg, and it was a shame that his fantastic qualifying session, which had him up in P4, was taken away from him. He was given that 3-place grid penalty for overtaking cars on the pit exit. I think a reprimand or something that would have been fine with it being the end of the season. I was kind of hoping they'd overlook it, because he'd just done an absolutely brilliant job to put that car there. Had he maintained that place in a decent start, staying out of trouble early doors, I think he would have been right up there, and probably had enough in the car to manage keeping the Alpine behind, and it would have been a different story then, potentially, but obviously needed K-Mag to help him out a little bit there. But from there on, he just didn't have enough pace in the car to keep or put much pressure on the Alpines. Did a pretty solid job though in his final race for the team, and yeah, just couldn't catch or pass him. I think his penalty for the qualifying really proved costly for him in the end, but he drove a pretty solid race, a comfortable P8 in the end. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. P9 for Fernando Alonso. It was a solid race from him, nothing spectacular, but he did the job. That car, he'll be happy with some points. So it has been way off mid-season, and to come back towards the end, it's been a stronger finish, so they'll be happy with that. Beats Oscar Piastri and Alex Albon, but apart from that, it was a fairly steady race, nothing spectacular. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. 10th place finish for Oscar Piastri, and his race started as an absolute disaster, didn't it? At the worst possible scenario, got taken out by Max Verstappen. Not his fault. Difficult one to judge Oscar. Decent recovery in the end, but it wasn't really helped. The big mistake for him was the big punt up the rear of Franco Colapinto, which gave him a puncture and ruined his race. Oscar, lucky enough to not cause any serious damage to his front wing, didn't need to replace that, did he, in the end? And then from there on, it was just a struggle to come back and recover. Got stuck behind Fernando for a period in the race. Managed to pass Albon in the end, who was on actually really old tyres, and he was really trying his best to hold on for some points, but Oscar was quick enough in the better car to, come back and pick up some decent a point. Obviously every point helped for McLaren, but Lando, his teammate, did the job for the team up front. But yeah, a bit of a scruffy race for the final race of the season for Oscar, and that's not like him. He's normally very consistent. One of his biggest strengths for this season at least has been for Oscar, but this one was a difficult race for him. A 4 out of 10. 11th place finish for Alex Albon, and he had a horrible qualifying session. started in P18, but his race start was brilliant. Up 5 places, up to P13. Mid-race, he managed to wait with that long stint, went up to P9, and then pitted probably a good few laps earlier than everybody else. He probably should have run that first stint a lot longer, and then he gave his hard tyres an awful lot to do at the end. It was always going to be a struggle. I mean, he had 30-40 laps old tyres at one point, and trying to hold back a fast McLaren was always going to be difficult. It did look potentially that 1 point could be on the cards for him. Just missed out in the end. He was sort of 6 seconds behind Fernando Alonso, and just couldn't get the move or hold off Oscar, which was always going to be a difficult task. But he was just saying he just couldn't get the tyre warm up in the end into the tyres. That's what really cost him in the end to try and hold on to that points, and that was the big struggle all race. But a decent recovery from where he started. It's just a shame he missed out on some points. It's been a tough season for the Williams, and they'll be hoping to come back stronger next time out. And Alex as well, he's got a tough teammate for him next season, but them two working together should be brilliant for the team. I've given him an 8 out of 10 for this weekend. 12th place finish for Yuki Tsunoda, and it got off to the worst possible start. He was up in P11, and a decent start for him would have meant he would have in for a fight for some points potentially, but that clutch issue, which meant he just plumb last at the start, and then he had an awful lot to do. That clutch problem came again when he came in for his showed its head when he came into the pits, and then he just had a real difficult race. A nice battle with Oscar Piastri for a fair amount. He wasn't an easy person to overtake. Used his DRS well to defend on the second DRS. He was getting good exits, did the best he could, but he'll be hoping to try and get that Red Bull seat ahead of Liam Lawson in the final test. It's him against him, Lawson, Isaac Hadjar as well, isn't it, in there, that Red Bull at the end of the season. So it'll be a battle really, it looks like, for that Red Bull seat. But he's done a phenomenal job this season. Hats off to Yuki. He's just shown what a brilliant competitor is. 6-0 to him in qualifying to Liam Lawson. So shows what a real solid job he's done. But it's a shame the clutch issue really cost him this race. So hard one to judge, but decent racing from him. But I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. 13th place finish for Zhou Guanyu in his final race in F1 for now. He's hopeful that he can find his way back into the sport. Looks like potential reserve Ferrari driver seat is on the cards for him. Will he go into WEC? Who knows? But I guess the GM Cadillac seat is probably the one that is probably looking most likely for him. Potentially, he's got big backers, which look like might have saved him in this seat for Sauber, but it came a little bit too late. That 2 points at the end of the season for him, the good results. But this one was a difficult start. He got 5-second penalty for a jump start at the beginning, made himself up into P10, finished P13 in the end. He pit early, managed to beat Stroll, but going very long on the second stint probably made it a really difficult finish for him in the end. I'm giving him a 6 out of 10. He was one driver that I was saying that, he's not quite done enough for me to deserve a seat on the F1 grid. Will he go away, revamp himself and come back a better driver? We've seen Nico Hülkenberg do that, so it's definitely possible. Will we see Joe again? Who knows? Be interesting to see if he can make his way back into Formula One like his teammate Valtteri, who's determined to not let it go either yet. But good luck to Joe wherever he ends up. He's done. He'll be well remembered for the 2 points last time out. But for this weekend, it was a tough one for him. 14th place, Lance Stroll, and he started in 13th, finished in 14th. He ran out P13. It was a so-so, nothing spectacular at all from him. In no man's land a little bit. He'll be hoping for this season, it couldn't have come to an end soon enough for him. He goes into another new season. How long will he let it run before they say, you've had your chance, unlucky mate? Because he's not quite done enough for me. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. 15th place for Jack Doohan in his first race for Alpine. He got the early start, not ahead of Ocon. Could have really backfired this call in the end, but Pierre Gasly did the job for the team up front, but ran P17, managed to get up into P13 at one point, but from there on, never in the really any shout for any points. Was comfortably behind Lance Stroll, 18 seconds in the end. He managed to beat Kevin Magnussen, but I think Kevin Magnussen went for about 5 stops, didn't he, to get the fastest lap of the race. But yeah, decent enough, got to the end, which is important in your first race, but didn't really show anything spectacular. But it was good for him probably just to get his feet under the table, get that first run. He'll learn an awful lot going into the new season, so a decent enough, and he was happy with his experience in the end. But in terms of the race, wasn't anything spectacular at all. I'm giving him a 4 out of 10. A P16 finish for Kevin Magnussen, his final race in F1. This does look like the curtains are now closed on his career. He's had some absolutely memorable moments. Brazil pole position comes to mind. He's had some brilliant moments with this team, some really good results. He was up to P7 in the race early doors, and it looked like it was going really well. Then got unfortunate when Valtteri locked both fronts and careened into the side of him, took him out, and from there on, it was a strange early or middle of the race pit stop when he went on for softs. I'm not sure what the call or the thought was that he picked up the fastest lap, but then came in again to take fastest lap towards the end, like just the highlight of his career, kind of like a Daniel Ricciardo sort of look, wasn't it? A fastest lap on you, tap on your back sort of thing to see his way out of Formula One. He's been a credit to the Haas team. He's done some real good jobs for much of the season. Some disappointing races also from him, but his hard, difficult racing early doors was really under the spotlight this season, wasn't it? When he was, really questioned for his tactics, but he did everything he could for the team, and you can't discredit him for that. He really fought valiantly for every point for that team to help his teammate, a real team player. Been a credit to F1. Interesting to see if and where he goes next, but I think that's the end of his career in F1. I can't see a way back for him really, but he's done an absolute tremendous job. For this race though, it's a shame it's ended the way it did in the end, last and just not really in there for any points at all, but the car was quick and looked like it could have, but I think that Valtteri incident really cost him and set him back. I'm giving him a 6 out of 10 in his final race. On to the DNFs then, and the first of those was Sergio Perez, lap 2. I don't know if it was part of the incident that spun him around with Bottas that meant he had to retire, but it just tops off what's been a really poor season from him. He was defiant though, wasn't he, at the end, saying that he will be at Red Bull next season. He has a contract. But at the end of the race, he was kind of sort of saying, we'll see what happens, what comes of it. It looks like there's a deal to be agreed. Nico Rosberg, dropped it at the end of the race, didn't he, saying that potentially there's about a £16 million payoff. He's looking for something similar akin to what Daniel Ricciardo got when he got paid off and moved on at Renault. And I think that's really the deal that Sergio Perez is potentially looking for if he's not going to race on into next season. But he was defiant, especially after qualifying, that he's got a contract for next year and he expects to be driving, despite Horner saying, we'll sit down with Sergio, he's not had a great season, I'm sure he'll understand. Not really happening from Sergio Perez's side, at least. Anyway, Max Verstappen coming to his defence, saying he's harsh. Sergio Perez is not an idiot. It's just really gone badly wrong for him somewhere in the last 18 months. He was complaining of the niggles back as far as Miami, where from there on last season, he was just having lots and lots of issues, never really did anything promising apart from the races in Baku, which is he's a specialist around there, but you can't have a driver in the car that's good at one circuit. He was on for a decent race there this season as well, but shame it ended up in a DNF for him there. His luck hasn't been with him when he's been on for decent results. Last time out was another one, he managed to get himself up into a decent position and then DNF there. Another one here in Abu Dhabi in the end of the race season, so just tops off, which has been an absolutely horrible campaign for him. Will we see him again next season? It's still up in the air. Highly unlikely though, I think. And then he's out for a season or two, or will that be end of his career? Who knows for Sergio Perez. He's had a phenomenal time. It's shown what a valiant driver he is. 21, he was brilliant. 22, he did the job. 23, he came home in second place and is probably all that Red Bull needed from him, but the car was so dominant and so good that you kind of expected, and a little bit disappointed wasn't more from him there. But it was a hard fought second place for Sergio last year, and this year he's been absolutely miles off the pace. He's had more damage, highest driver with the highest damage in terms of cost of bereavement, about 5 million. That's more than Logan Sargeant, who lost his seat earlier in the season, and potentially will the man that replaced Logan Sargeant replace him, Sergio Perez. still up in the air of what Franco Colapinto does, and I'll get to him in a minute. But for Sergio Perez, it's a shame it's ended the way it has. He's been absolutely brilliant for parts of his career. He's had a phenomenal career, there's no doubts about that, but it's just a shame that he's really lost his way. It reminds me a little bit of Mika Hakkinen. He was a double world champion, and he kind of really lost his way in final races for McLaren, and for Sergio it's gone worse than that, hasn't it? So I can't really see any way where he could end up next, but poor race to DNF in the end, disappointing, not really his fault, but what can you do when it's been a horrible campaign? No rating for him. Next up, Valtteri Bottas, another one that DNF'd. He had a bad start in the race, down 4 with collision with Sergio Perez, and then he got the big lock-up and took out Kevin Magnussen. A real horrible final race for him in the end. He got that front left puncture as well. It's just a shame how it's ended for him, but he is being very defiant as well also, isn't he? Much like Sergio Perez. He's got nothing on the table really, but he just doesn't feel like this is the way it should end. It's not a proper ending for him, and he's really looking for that next opportunity. Will he find that at GM Cadillac? A lot of these drivers making their way out are sort of hanging their hat on that potential one seat there, looks like, isn't it? Because they're determined to have an American in at least one of the seats at GM Cadillac. If it's announced that they'll have a Ferrari engine there, but I'll watch a video out to come on that. But yeah, that's really the only place for Valtteri not next season, but the season after that. Could he do with this break? Will it really serve him well? Like I said, it served Nico Hülkenberg brilliantly well. K-Mag's done the same, gone away, come back, and had some good races. Valtteri is a solid driver actually. On his day, he's right up there with the best. He's got pace. He's normally Mr. Reliable. It's just not gone for him this season. Ends the season with 0 points, not what he would have wanted. His last year experienced teammate picked up 2 points, didn't he, with a brilliant result last time out. But it's the first time in his career he's finished a season without any points. So yeah, real shame for Valtteri. Shame we've kind of lost the Valtteri 2.0. Came later on in his career, and it's a shame we didn't kind of see that earlier. He's been brilliant, a real character on the grid, and let's see where he ends up, if anywhere. I mean, Mercedes reserve driver seat looks like it's his for next year. The man that was in that seat has moved on, so it looks like that's a deal that should possibly be announced soon, but I'm sure he's weighing up his options to see if he can actually get a drive in some sort of racing series somewhere, just to keep himself in that groove. Again, no rating for Valtteri Bottas. Franco Colapinto, another one, disappointing race, hit up the rear by Oscar Piastri, and then not long after that called into the pits and DNF'd. James Vowles sort of saying sorry, it shouldn't have ended like this. A big apologies for him. It's a shame actually, because he was really promising when he first jumped in that car, and then it looked like he was all set for that Red Bull seat, but then a couple of big crashes and sort of put a bit of a shadow on the doubt. Was that extra hype and that bit of pressure, knowing that if he continues to perform the way he has and all that hype, did it get a little bit too much for him that a Red Bull seat was on the cards? It's not out of the question yet. Let's see what happens with Perez. Let's see what happens with Lawson. So Franco could make his way up into one of them seats, and it could be a master stroke from Williams, who've taken a big hit on the bill with damage, and if they can get Colo out into a seat, I'm sure they'll receive some compensation from somewhere for him. He is one of their academy drivers, so he could be nothing but proud of his stint that he's had. Really put himself in the shop window. He's been absolutely brilliant. Very good defensive driving. We've seen Sergio Perez praising how good he defends, and very quick on one lap pace. Also had some good qualifying performances. Good racecraft, defends like a lion, and he's got a strong, promising future ahead of him. Just needs his place on the grid, but where will he find that next season? Who knows? But again, no rating for him. And Liam Lawson, the final retiree of the race, and he had not a really good race at all. Was coming into the race, and then he got that poor pit stop from the team where they didn't put that wheel on, and that 10-second stop go was just a 30-second penalty in the end for that. Really costly in the end. He was way down 16 seconds to Kevin Magnussen at one point, and then retired on the very last lap. He was on for a decent enough-ish result. The car wasn't quick in the race, and Their season has been disappointing overall. There was a big hype when we had, like I've said before, with Zach Brown sort of saying, is this really the right thing, having two teams so closely linked? Who knows what kind of data is transferred across? It's so hard to police that kind of thing. So it should really be looked at, and that it's just not really gone well for him. Liam Lawson, he came with after that real good performance that he stepped in for Danny Rick early on. Come back with a full seat for 6-7 races, and he's not really delivered in the same way. He's been bit 6-0 by Yuki Tsunoda, like I said earlier on. So his qualifying performances haven't been fantastic. He's had some real good racing, but despite all that, he still looks like the man to replace Sergio Perez, which is surprising. Not sure what the deal goes with that. It is with that one, but good luck to him if he does get that. Is it a little bit too soon? I feel it is. He probably should spend that one more season at Racing Bull, rate in his craft, improve and develop a little bit more. I think he needs to do that. And for me, it should be Yuki that goes into that seat. He's been phenomenal. But for Liam Lawson for this race, it was looking like it was going to be good. All came down crashing in the end. I'm giving him a 3 out of 10. He did finish pretty much all of the race, but the last lap. On to the final predictions of the season, and well, these have gone horribly wrong for me. I thought it'd be a strong Ferrari track, and I thought Charles Leclerc would take pole, Verstappen second and Norris third. But it was a McLaren 1-2, Lando, Norris, Piastri, and then third for Carlos Sainz. Wrong on all three there. And for the race, I thought Charles Leclerc would win, Verstappen second and Sainz third. But yeah, Norris took the win with a phenomenal drive. Sainz was second and Leclerc third. I thought it'd be a good weekend for Ferrari, and well, despite them not getting the Constructors' Championship, I think a 2-3, they can be very happy with that, especially considering where Charles Leclerc's weekend started in his qualifying. I thought it'd be a bad weekend for the Alpine. Well, it wasn't. They've nicked and taken 6th place in the Constructors' Championship right at the dying end of a long campaign, which has been horrible for them, but a brilliant result from Pierre Gasly in the end. I thought Haas would take P6, they didn't, and I thought McLaren would take the Constructors, and well, they got to thank Lando Norris for an absolutely fantastic drive. And that's it. That's the final race of the season. Driver ratings done. Watch out for my full season race review of the drivers, of the teams, and my favourite races. There'll be loads more content to keep us busy through the off season. And it's a short winter break this time, thankfully. We've got the big event where all the teams will all launch their cars on the 18th of February, so something to look forward to, where we see that big labour reveal of every team's labour reveal rather than a car reveal. We know the car reveal, really, they only show the head of what they've actually produced in Australia, which we head to on the 14th of March 2025. And it looks set to be an absolutely brilliant season with 4 teams potentially vying for that. Each of their own got small issues, each different to each one. I mean, who knows? Every track has suited every team massively differently. The form book's just gone out the window, hasn't it? We've just seen what Mercedes run. We had four wins out of 3 or 3 wins out of 4 races at one point in the season. Red Bull started brilliantly strong and then dropped down to the 3rd, 4th best car at times. McLaren started badly and then had the best car for much of the season. Ferrari and then hit the ground running and found some real form to get themselves back. But for that mid-season drop off and then the pickup where they just had 3 or 4 races of bad results, and way off the points. I think they should really have been Constructors' Championship, and so they look strong going into next season, so it's really anybody's game. Mercedes, they up and down, you don't know what they're going to expect, so anything could happen. They look like they've got a mega quick car when they can get it in the window, a bit like what the Red Bull has turned into towards the end of the season. A small sweet spot to find on that. The development of these cars is going to hit a limit at some point, and they're going to all head towards 26, which is the biggest regulation change that we've seen in an awfully long time. So It'd be massively exciting. I can't wait for the action to get going in Australia. But there we have it. Season 24 done, round 24 done. Abu Dhabi was, a really exciting race. Started off fantastically well. There we have the driver ratings. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment as always. And thanks for sticking with the long video. See you next time.